welcome to the Adversity to Advantage podcast. My name is Liz Hudson. I'm the ET Co-ordinator for Connect Housing, and I'm here today with
Shaffia Khatun, Domestic Abuse Housing Support Co-ordinator at the Refuge.
And
Shazana, Monir, Community Housing Officer at Connect Housing.
Okay, so in today's episode we'll be discussing how people are supported in service and what that looks like, why that support is needed, what it takes to deliver it, and how it can change people's lives for the better. So let's dive straight in. Just give us an overview of what your roles are, because I think they're a little bit different, aren't they? So do you want to just start with what you do at the Refuge, because that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, so Refuge is a big building where we have 10 apartments and we house families and some single ladies who are fleeing domestic abuse and need that emergency accommodation. So that's what we do. In terms of the support that we offer, generally we do something called a support plan and the outcome star, and basically that looks at all different areas of support. So we look at things like safety, risk assessments around that. We look at the accommodation, so what their immediate needs are, but also kind of short-term, longer-term goals in terms of where they want to be. Then we look at things like children, if they've got any, what their needs might be, finances, kind of their own well-being and confidence and self-esteem. We also look at kind of learning and development, any legal issues. So there's a whole host of areas that we look at, and we kind of put a plan together and work with that individual over a period of time with the hope of obviously moving them on into a better place now. Families are generally with us between 4 months up to 2 years. They're allowed to be in service up to 2 years. So yeah, we meet with them regularly and make sure that that support plan is being implemented, it's being reviewed as we go along.
Right, okay, yeah, that sounds really interesting. So I presume it's taking a multi-agency approach as well.
It is. And
kind of dealing with things like immigration and that kind of stuff. So it's, I suppose, from your point of view, it's like you're having to wear many hats at one time. And I suppose sometimes there can be challenges to that, do you think?
Yeah, definitely, it can be very challenging. Immigration is something that crops up all the time. We do get a lot of ladies that come in that have those issues. I've kind of worked with immigration solicitors for many, many years and kind of know what kind of options are available, so we're very quickly able to support a lady that has immigration issues. But there are other issues like safeguarding that crops up quite a lot, where there's children involved and stuff. So yeah, it's kind of just being aware and alert to all of those different areas, and then just making sure that we're working alongside other professionals just to make sure that that support is maximised and they're getting the best that they can whilst they're in with us.
So do you want to just explain a little bit about your role? Because I think you've kind of just changed roles, haven't you?
Yeah, that's right. So I started off with Connect about 5 years ago in single homeless services for young people. So I started off there for about 4 years, went off on maternity, came back, and I have a new role now, which is a community housing officer, and I cover Huddersfield and Calderdale. Linking in with what Shaffia said as well, a lot of the work that we did with the young people in our 2 hostels across Kirklees was all about supporting them. Immigration cropped up a lot of the time. We had excellent transitions from asylum seeker refugee young people who secured independent accommodation. So that was really good. And again, it was just supporting those young people from the start of the journey right till the end when they secured independent accommodation, whether that was private rented or majority of the time it was through the council. And now my role is it's very varied. It's quite different. More hectic, but I'm enjoying every part of it, to be fair. So now I'm more out and about and dealing with ASB a lot of the time in our communities.
Just explain what ASB is.
Yeah, antisocial behaviour. So on my patch, so Huddersfield and Calderdale, like I've mentioned before.
What do you think the challenges are then, from kind of both of your perspectives?
I think for me, what I found, bearing in mind I'm still kind of new to the role, for me, when tenants and non-tenants are reporting ASB to us, it's really difficult to be that neutral person. You've got to play good cop, you've got to play bad cop at the same time. And, you're going into people's homes to discuss antisocial behaviour and other communal disputes. And it can be quite challenging, but at the end of the day, somebody needs to deal with it.
So just going back to your original role then, about supporting young people, what do you think the advantages are of kind of looking at that holistic approach, I suppose?
sharing information, I think, because young people, obviously, they're either 16 years old, 17, 18, around that age range. They're not aware of what agencies are out there, what support services are out there, what's in their locality, and they don't know how to access support, and they didn't know that I could register with Choose and Move, or get some support with, alcohol services, drug services, etc., etc. So I think sharing and providing the information and literature that we have at hand, and passing that on, and them utilising those services for
So it's
different
almost
reasons.
like kind of from like an early intervention process, so that you're looking at supporting young people to make the best out of what they can in terms of their knowledge, skills, in training, education, and that kind of stuff. So you're looking at it from that perspective. And do you think, have you found really positive outcomes from that kind of support?
Yeah, we have, So I was working with the young people in the hostels for about 4 years, and we ensured that we provided all the support needed internally and externally to ensure that our young people are housed, and they sort of maintain and sustain their tenancies with that support element as part of that package. It's about one-to-one support and tailored support as well. And we had excellent and positive outcomes, and I think Shaffia from the refuge will agree with me on that.
Yeah, because it'd be interesting just to see that from your perspective.
Yeah, just picking up on what Shazana said, I think when we get families coming, they've come from such difficult backgrounds where there's not been stability for themselves or their children, if they've got children coming with them. And often many of the women don't really understand what their rights are, what options are available to them, and even down to the basics that they could actually sometimes even hold their own key. So I've had women, especially where, say, they've come from a different country, say, so there's immigration issues generally, so they're learning about life in the UK, and some of these have been so controlled in their abusive situations that they've never had a key. So to be able to hold their own key to their own apartment is
or I suppose
huge...
as well, things like a bank account.
Bank accounts, or the freedom to go out and not be controlled or manipulated in terms of when they can go, and that kind of. So the freedom that it gives them in the refuge is amazing. And in terms of success stories, we get a lot of them, and it's amazing to see how they transition from when they come to when they leave. So even just today, I was just doing kind of like the outcome star, like my final one for a lady that's leaving. And when she came, she was absolutely petrified, no confidence whatsoever, didn't know what she was entitled to in terms of housing, benefits, and just her own kind of personal rights and things like that. And now she's leaving. She's just got a beautiful new home, and is just looking forward to that fresh start. And if that was to be her 2 years ago, she probably wouldn't have been able to do that. So the support that they get, the ongoing regular support, and it's just so much. We talk about lots of different things just to kind of get them ready to kind of be in their own tenancy, fear-free, away from the abuse is amazing. So 9 times out of 10, it's a successful outcome. The odd time, sometimes women choose that refuge isn't a good place for them. It's not the right place, or it's not the right time. And so they kind of leave. But I wouldn't necessarily say that's not necessarily a positive outcome either. It's just making sure that if they choose to leave, then they've got all the backup and safety plans in place, and
got all the information
that they need so that they can make an informed decision, about their future, if they choose to go back home or whether they choose at a later point to go into refuge and stuff. So
it's interesting that it's very evident that the correlation between both services is that it's that support and that wraparound care and that holistic approach, and working with multi-agencies to make sure that everybody's got the right information, that everybody's kind of singing from the same hymn book, so that we can offer the best service and the best outcomes for the people that you're clearly working with. And again, going back to your new role, which is a little bit the same, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
In terms of making sure that people have got a voice, that they're heard, that we're listening as an organisation to what people's needs are and what their approach is to how they see their lives and their challenges individually.
Yeah, of course. And another thing, as part of my role, is we do, site visits and scheme walkabouts. We might just go to a scheme and just pop our head round and have a little wander, see what's going on. And tenants do come out and they're like, oh, it's nice to see you again. And that's what we want to hear. You know, tenants will complain and say, we actually don't see any staff members from Connect Housing. And then I'm like, well, here I am. Have you got any issues? Is there anything that I can help you with? It's not always, for me, it's not always about going and dealing with ASB issues. It's about me being there.
It's so important to be visible, isn't it? It's
and have that
important,
face.
and so people can see who they're. It's you know, it's certainly in my role because of COVID and things like that. We kind of got into just doing telephone conversations with people or telephone support with people, but they're not actually seeing that person visibly and knowing what those kind of needs are from a one-to-one, face-to-face kind of point of view. It's so difficult, isn't it? And, you know, I think you just get a better response and outcome from people if you are able to do that. Yeah, when you're out and about, and it's nice to go into people's homes as well and have just general discussions. Because not necessarily about if they've got any issues, but just have a chat with somebody. You know, just pop in and see how they're doing. I mean, recently I've been dealing with 1 or 2 tenants who have been in hospital long term and now back in their own home. So I'm popping out to see somebody tomorrow just for a quick 5 minutes and just see how she's getting on, see if she needs any support, any referrals being made. It's about that as well. It's not always about dealing with the ASB side of it, because that just comes across as negative quite a lot. And what you're wanting to do is try and focus on what the positives are, and I would imagine that's kind of the same in your role, isn't it? Obviously you're going to be visible all the time, really. You're going to be there for anybody to come and talk to you if they need to talk to you, but I would imagine just sitting in the lounge area, just having a chat with people while they're in there is brilliant, because it makes you more approachable. Yeah, because like you say, it is that professional relationship that we've got with the individual, but they do want. So on a Monday we have like our family support worker host a chit chat after school, and the kids are there because our lounge and playroom are kind of together. So the kids are there and then the parents are there, and you're absolutely right, it kind of breaks down. It builds a relationship better. It breaks down that kind of formal relationship, and then you're just talking about general everyday life stuff and whatnot. So you get really more out of people, you do. I think, when you kind of have that softly approach, and when it is when you're not actually talking about what their problems or their issues are, and you're just having a general chat. I know from my point of view, I used to work for social services, and we used to run kind of groups very similar to that. And when you're just chatting with people, you actually get to know a little bit more about that person, and they kind of let the guard down a little bit, and you kind of get a bigger picture of what's going on. It's so much better than kind of keeping it in a formal kind of arena, isn't it? And touching on that, something that I've agreed with 1 or 2 of my schemes at the minute for next spring and summertime is to have gather round in the front car park of certain schemes and just grab a brew and grab a biscuit, and let's get our garden chairs out and just sit and have a natter. And I think that'll be really nice as well. And like you said, it's about building those relationships as well. It's not always about ASB. We want to get to know our tenants, and build that trust, improve things for them, and build that trust, and those relationships where if there was an issue, the tenants can pick up the phone and say, right, I'm ringing Shazana, my housing officer, or I'm ringing such and such a person, because they've already built that relationship, and they've seen me and they know who I am. So it just kind of removes any kind of barriers to communication as well. And I suppose as well, it's kind of building that confidence and self-esteem, isn't it? Certainly from your point of view, and from when you worked with the younger people, it's like it's at rock bottom, and if they've never had that support from family life or from friends, for example, then they're not going to know what they want or what they need, or what they kind of, from a mental health and emotional point of view. It's so important that you work on those kind of self-esteem and confidence, and it's almost like, I always think, certainly with some of the people that I work with, it's like going back to basics. It's like, if you've got a 5-year-old, for example, and you're kind of reinforcing positives rather than negatives, then you're going to get more of that positive. So you're giving those people that sense of responsibility. So just saying to somebody, God, you know what, that was fantastic. You did that really well. Wow. Oh my God, you managed to film them on your own. That's excellent, brilliant. And it's just that kind of boosting, isn't it? It's the little things that matter, isn't it? Yeah.
Because, like I say, if they've had it all their lives where it's been negative, right from the word go, from since they were little babies, that subconscious of theirs has developed in a very negative way, so it's wired like that.
Yeah.
And they might have had that all their lives, and then they come into, say, one of our services, and then we're actually telling them different. So we have to consistently do that. So I know certainly when we're doing any sort of like mental health, emotional wellbeing work with the individuals as part of their support plan, it is about reiterating and repeating. So we might have to repeat to an individual that's amazing, you're amazing, because they don't know who they are. They've never kind of found their own kind of identity or personality, because they've always been dictated to by whoever they've been.
Not just circumstances at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's, it's kind of, particularly with younger people as well, they're like little lost souls sometimes when they come into service, and certainly with the people that have kind of fled domestic abuse. It's like, where do I go? What do I do? How do I manage? Who's going to look after me? Who's going to offer me the support and the motivation that I need to improve myself and to look at what I can do? People, we're all born the same at the end of the day. We all have the same skills and abilities when we're born, to move on and do and create and do whatever we want to do in life. It's just sometimes society, community, and family kind of drag that back down. Don't
Totally.
they?
Yeah.
So what do you think the frustrations are then?
Oh,
Frustrations for individuals, or
Just in general. So obviously you're wearing many hats when you're working with people, particularly people that are vulnerable and have got complex needs, because you're almost like a social worker without the legalities of being a social worker. So, and taking a multi-agency approach as well, sometimes your priorities for your person that you're working with might not be the same for somebody else, for another professional. So there's got to be, sometimes there's not always that joined up thinking.
Yeah.
So have you kind of found that challenging sometimes, particularly when you're working with agencies like immigration and they're so slow and you're trying to get this sorted, or with social workers, for example, or community-led groups, or anything that you might think, well, come on, let's pull together here, because we need to look at how we can support this person any way we can.
No, I agree. And that what I would say is this is why it's so important for us as support workers to be able to kind of advocate the needs of our families or people that we work with, because you're right. I often get frustrated with social workers. I get frustrated with like CAFCAS officers. It's one thing supporting the individual and kind of guiding them, but let me give you a real example where I supported a lady who was new to the country, not new, but as in she wasn't born here, and really struggled to understand the kind of safeguarding CAFCAS legal process, and her personality came across very dry, quiet, and she wasn't being as open. But that I didn't assess that as her being deliberate. But because she was working with the likes of a CAFCAS officer and a solicitor, they weren't understanding that she just was from a different country. The process of raising children, doing things with children was very different. They were just literally taking whatever she said like that. Whereas because I was able to intervene and say, well, actually, the culture is very different. The way she comes across maybe, but breaking it down a bit further and getting the CAFCAS officer and solicitor to understand made a huge difference, from her risking losing the children to then making a massive turnaround and the CAFCAS officer actually writing in her favour.
So you have to take on the advocate role, basically.
Absolutely.
And I think as well, going back to kind of domestic abuse in terms of the people that you work with, I think sometimes in terms of social services, when somebody reports domestic abuse and wants to make changes or make things different or improve the circumstances, social services get involved and they're almost deemed as being a perpetrator in some instances, where we're going to look at a Section 47, for example. We're going to do an assessment. You're going to have to go through and jump through all these hoops because you are a victim to domestic abuse.
Yeah.
And I also think sometimes that system's, it doesn't lend itself, does it?
No.
Because these people need that support. They don't need to feel like they've done something wrong.
Yeah, and often women do say that they feel like they're the ones that are wrong and they're having to justify a lot of things, and that's the experience that they get generally with the social workers as well as with the police. Like I say, that's why it's so important that as workers, we go in and we're making sure that we are representing our ladies and our families. And had they not had that support, then they probably would have got lost in that system. Or, you know, the system may have failed them like many times before.
So it's going back to making sure that you're a voice for those people.
100%.
Under our kind of Connect Housing umbrella, it's such a wide variety of services that we offer, and we need to make sure that within that process, the people that we are working with, that are supported fully, and they know what their rights are as individuals,
100%.
and they know that they can come and talk to us, and we can fight their battles for them if we need to.
Yeah. And kind of build their confidence and self-esteem, so that when they're no longer in our service, they know that actually what the police officer might have said there isn't quite right, or the social worker, and then hopefully they would have that courage and confidence to speak up and say, actually, hang on, I know that's not right. So,
and they can advocate for themselves
by the time they leave.
And same for kind of younger people. It's exactly the same, isn't it? Almost like, you know, I can imagine that going out into the big wide world once they're leaving your service, they need to have the skills and abilities to be able to do that, and to have the confidence to be able to kind of challenge what they think isn't appropriate for them. Because I think you're right, I think there is sometimes a veil over some of the vulnerabilities of people that makes it difficult for them to challenge professionals. Because even though we are professionals, we're not always right. And, you know, as an individual who's coming into service, you know, we need to make sure that we're offering what we can, and we're listening to them as individuals and offering the right sort of advice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think from what Shaffia said as well, I think Shaffia will come across this a bit more than me. If there's a language barrier with certain families or tenants that you're dealing with, it's important for us as Connect staff to know what available in-house resources are available, such as, you know, when we use Language Line, it can take many minutes to get through, or someone ideal to speak to, or sometimes that interpreter for that language is not available. But if staff at Connect Housing already know that such and such a person speaks this language, let me try them, see if they're available to translate for about a good 10-15 minutes. Why not? You know, we're supposed to be working together, and, you know, utilising your resources that you've already got in-house if you don't need to use them externally. So I think that's really important as well. And obviously I've worked in refuge elsewhere a number of years ago as well, and language barrier was a massive thing. How can we support these women from day dot if the language barrier is not met? And we've not removed that barrier. Let's start with the language first, and then we can, you know, support them fully. And
I think you're right in terms of what you've both said about having that kind of support plan, and that support plan being reviewed quarterly, so that, you know, you're updating it and you're saying, well, actually, we know we've ticked that box now, we can move on to something else, and taking it as in terms of step-by-step, baby steps. Let's work on this issue first, and then we can look at this. Because sometimes, certainly in my experience, people come in chaotic, don't they? And it's like, we've got this, we've got that, and it's about sitting people down and saying, actually, we can work through this because we know this is an immediate issue, and then we can look at this further down the line. So from your point of view, it's also about protecting ourselves as staff members as well. So do you feel like you've had that emotional and wellbeing support through Connect?
Yeah, I think so. We've got a new employee programme now, so obviously if we need it, it's there. We've been told that it's there, so we're aware. But I think I've been supported.
Because I think sometimes we forget about ourselves, that's all.
Yeah, we do,
when we're kind of wearing those many hats that we need to support individuals, we forget about our own emotional well-being. And I know from my point of view, quite often I've gone home and I've kind of regurgitated the day, if you like. And being awake till God knows what time, thinking about oh my God, I forgot to do this. Oh my God, what about that? Because we're dealing with a lot of, when it's safeguarding issues, when it's emotional and mental health, well-being and all the rest of it, it's massive, and it's a massive for us as well as for the individuals that we're working with.
Yeah, totally. No, I think, I've worked in domestic abuse for the best part of 25 years now, so I've been doing it a very long time, and I do feel to a certain extent that I feel like I've heard all the different scenarios, and you kind of automatically know, right, okay, I know what to do in this, and and so it doesn't feel as difficult for me anymore, just because I feel like I've done it for such a long time. But also I 100% agree that we do need to put ourselves first, and over the years, certainly over the last 10 years, I'd say I've invested in myself more.
I think there's been more recognition
Yes,
of that, hasn't
yeah.
there?
The need
across
for
the
it.
board.
Yeah.
I think that's why, and it's almost going back to that scenario of, you need to put your mask on the plane before you help anybody else.
Yeah.
And it's kind of that kind of thing, isn't it? And making sure you're taking that time out to support yourselves.
Yeah.
I'll give an example of that, where sort of Connect have been absolutely fantastic with me. I was working, obviously, at Swan Lane and Holland went off on maternity, came back, and it really didn't hit me about shift work, because obviously working in the single homeless young people's service, it's 24/7 bank holidays, shift work, your late shift is 2 till 10, we've got night workers there. It was quite hectic, and, you're on shift a lot of the time. And it didn't hit me when I came back after maternity thinking, how on earth am I going to do the shift work with a little baby at home? And, my husband does shift work as well. It just didn't hit me. So carried on, came back to work for a couple of weeks and then applied for the CHO role. And looking back now, I'm so glad that I applied. It's just fitted into my personal life so well, where I'm able to use my skills and abilities and just shine them so much more now, because I've got that flexibility, and my personal life has balanced really well with the working life. And I think that's just really worked out for me. Otherwise, I think I would have probably left Connect and looked for a more flexible role.
So that's great.
And Connect have been really accommodating in that aspect. I mean, I remember when I came back to shift work, I'd get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to drop my daughter off and hit the motorway. And you can imagine what the M62 is like. And now, completely, honestly, I'm just at ease, stress-free, drop my daughter off where she needs to go, and I'm just either working from home or coming into the office, and it's just fantastic. So I think in terms of self-care and putting yourself first, sometimes you need to weigh up.
You absolutely do.
Things,
you can't support individuals unless you've kind of supported yourself emotionally.
Yeah, and I think we forget about that a lot. We never really think about our emotional health and well-being, or, if you've got a concern, we never really think to discuss it with our colleagues or our managers.
You just kinda get on with it, don't you?
But when you've had that discussion with somebody or a quick 5-minute chat with your colleague, and everything's just off your shoulders, you feel so much better, don't you? Breath of fresh air, you just have that big sigh, and you're like, now it's time to move on. But it's really important, and I don't think we do it enough, to be honest.
I think Connect do really try and accommodate that work-life, personal life kind of balance, I think, So just another example, bouncing off you, Shazana, I'm due to go off on maternity leave soon, and the amount of support that they've put in place and the amount of flexibility and just making sure that I'm resting and I'm having these breaks and really working hard to just make sure that I'm as comfortable as possible in that you're just leading up to maternity leave.
Absolutely.
And that makes a world of a difference. So I think we as individuals need to, put ourselves first, because like you say, there's no way we can provide any level of quality service if we're not content with where we're at mentally, emotionally and physically, but also working in a place like Connect where that I feel like that understanding is there.
Yeah.
They'll do what they need to as far as they can. Obviously there's business needs as well which they have to take into consideration, but I've certainly found that in the refuge the team is good, and being able to accommodate us and our needs is also, they get that that's important.
And I think if you feel supported by the organisation, then you want to do more, don't you?
Yeah, you strive, don't you?
Absolutely.
And you shine more under a different light. There's another podcast for you, Liz. Employees and maternity leave.
But you know what? It's been great chatting to you, and I think you do fantastic work. It's
Thank
been
you.
Really
Thanks for having
interesting,
us.
And well done. Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.